Thanks for tuning into our seller interview series. Up today, we've got a news blog for sale in the publishing niche, covering topics like sports, health, entertainment, and technology. This blog makes more than $15,000 per month with more than $7,000 per month in net profit. The listing number for this is 40215. Now, we do these interviews to give potential buyers more information about both the seller and the sites they're looking to purchase. We hope these insights are helpful for you in making a buying decision. We've got the seller Kramer with us today to go through the site and cover everything from niche selection to traffic and monetization. Thanks for coming on, Kramer. Appreciate it.
Good to be here, Justin.
All right, man. So let's do a introduction. Can you tell me a little bit about your background in building or running websites or online businesses?
Sure. So we're a small media company based out of Arlington, Virginia in the U.S., and we have a series of news sites that we've operated and run in the past. And this one is kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, kind of our crown jewel. It's our biggest news site, and it's easily been our most successful news site. I started out building news sites almost 5 years ago and started off with a political news site. And, after running that for a little time, we realized people like to read about things other than politics. So we ended up building a couple other ones. We did a science one, a space news one, and then this is kind of our big site that covers all kinds of stuff. Like you said, technology, entertainment news, big trending stories in the U.S., world stories, all kinds of stuff.
It's funny, we generally recommend to people they should niche down and focus on a particular niche or even an industry within an industry, and you went the exact opposite direction with this one, but it's crushing it. I mean, just give a quick rundown. I mean, it's built in November 2012. You have monthly revenue nearing it on $16,000 a month. Your expenses are a little over $8,000 a month, so you definitely got some expenses there. Your net profit around $7,400 a month. But you're getting around 500,000 page views per month. So you definitely got some traffic. Tell me how the site makes money.
Yeah, so the site makes money. I mean, it's probably the model most news sites use, but it's more or less, deals with ad networks, advertising partners. And even since, we started this process with you guys, I think in March, we've added on, probably another dozen or so ad networks and just diversifying that advertising platform. But more or less, it's a, drive traffic in, run, ads on the site and, pay the writers based on the amount of page views they produce, and then just make sure your advertising CPM, your cost per 1,000 is higher than what you're paying your writers. And that model's worked out for us fairly well, at least over the past few months since we've implemented it fully.
It's funny, I was beating you up a little bit before the show. I was like, why don't you just pay these guys straight up per piece of content? And you were letting me know that, the model had changed. Basically, if you're paying for page views and you're paying them a dollar amount per page views, you're going to ensure that those writers are delivering content that drives page views. And that's what you get paid on, so that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the flat rate when we just paid writers per article, when that was working, it was solid setup. But, kind of as the environment changes, you realize, it's sometimes better to just get guaranteed content, and then sometimes it's better to get, people produce page views, they get paid for them. If they don't get paid. So we kind of saw the environment shifting towards the latter, and so we started to make that shift. I mean, we played around with the idea as early as 2014, and we saw some success. And so by the end of 2014, we had a fully implemented, completely commission-based writing setup. So it's worked out really well for us. In my opinion, it's a lot more stable moving forward. Anyone who buys this site probably would want to bring on additional writers and, kind of follow our training and our setup for doing so, because we've had a lot of, writers have stayed around for a while working for us. It's not, one of these operations where you have a rate of turnover. You're bringing on training writers and 2 weeks later they're moving on to something else. Our writers tend to stay with us for a while.
Well, that's what I like with the site is your intellectual property. Part of it, at least, is your process for hiring, bringing on, and retaining writers. And we talked about this, it is a process, right? You've got that figured out. You've got that locked down. And I think that's not just valuable for this site. It could be valuable for whoever buys this site and ends up in their portfolio. They can take that model or take those writers and apply it to some of their other sites. I think that's kind of interesting. Kramer, talk to me a little bit about why you chose this niche. I mean, why news? Why politics? Why, that setup? Did you see another site that was doing really well with it? Is it something that like you had an interest in?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was purely an interest. I've been a news junkie for as long as I can remember. So, and part of, moving on beyond this site is we want to focus on covering politics and running our political news site full time and have that be our sole focus. But, for me, the news industry is what I enjoy, kind of looking at and covering, and this site has been great in that it covers a lot of different topics. So you get, exposed to a lot of different news bits during the day. So from that perspective, it's a lot of fun to run. To touch back on your earlier point, if somebody does add this to a portfolio, I think that's probably, one of the best setups they could, put this site into, because you bring in all these advertising networks. You have this great training process. You have this great model that, if you have a new site that's getting traffic, it can more or less be applied to that across the board.
So I know that you're selling the site and you're looking to move on to the political site, and that's your interest. But why not just hire someone to kind of manage this process and move on? Like, why are you selling it instead?
I mean, for me, I've done the multiple site thing. I've been doing it for a couple years now. And it's really this thing of in theory, I mean, exactly what you propose. It sounds great, but it's never that easy. I mean, this thing is still going to take my time. I also tend to be, someone who's always kind of looking for the next thing, the cutting edge. And so, somebody can take this site, they can run it as is and it'll work just fine. But I'm not someone who just lets a site stay static. And, I'm always looking to tweak the design, make it a little bit better here, make it a little better there. So for me, it makes more sense to just, divest everything, move on and focus on the thing that I actually want to put my time towards, so I'd like to do it that way, but, in practice, my experience has been if you have something, it's going to take your time no matter how, well managed it is.
Yeah, even if it doesn't take up a ton of your time, there's a mind suck there, right? Because it's still in your portfolio. You're still running it. You're still responsible for it. And you're looking to make a clean break. We did that last year in our business where we dumped a bunch of side projects so that we could really focus in. And it's been really helpful for us. What's the plan for the cash when you sell this? What, are you taking a trip to Hawaii? Are you going to reinvest in another business? What's the plan there?
I mean, to be honest, more or less, it's not really a huge thing for me. I mean, we've got these other sites that run fine and we've got a few other models that we're working on. So, for me, I'll just put it in the bank and, focus on the next thing. I mean, I'm 29 years old, so I'm not too worried about, cash and that whole thing. I just want to get a few good, interesting projects up and running.
Yeah, it's a nice win, right? It's a mini win. This isn't life-changing money, but it's a nice little cash out. It's a nice little win, and you can move on to the next project that you want to work on. Tell me a little bit about the history of the site. I mean, I know it was built in 2012, but what was the trajectory of the business the first few weeks, the first few months?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking back, I think this was the second site we launched, and it was our first kind of big attempt at building a big site that covers all kinds of stuff. So, I don't know if I can remember the early days. We had basically pulled the model we were playing around with the political site. Let's do it through a site dedicated to covering all kinds of stuff. So it kind of grew out of, I think like most successful endeavors, you kind of get an idea, hey, this is working a little bit. Let's, look into this a little bit more. And so, once we started it, we knew, we had a really good idea of, here's kind of what we do with it. I mean, to be honest, as stuff moved forward, the bigger thing was, how do you expand? Because it started out as me and my business partner is listed on there, Ross. He was a full-time writer, but he was also my business partner at the time. It started off just us writing on the site. And then, you hit a certain point where you say, hey, can I get this content, pay somebody for it and, get 10 times as much. I get some overhead, but I also see a huge return on the revenue side. So
how much content did you start the site off with?
Back in the day, we were probably doing I'd say maybe 12, 15 pieces a day between the two of us.
Oh my God, that's a lot, man. You were just knocking it out.
It was, yeah, I mean, I've got some good stories on that front. So, but yeah, I mean, once we figured out, paying writers, I think we started off, this was when we were paying per article. We started off with, I think, 4 writers total. So it was me, Ross, and then we would each manage 2 writers. We did that for quite a while. I think for a full year we were running under that operation. Then, kind of struck us, hey, why don't we just expand this even more?
That's a tough decision because you're making money. You're like, yes, I have to do all this work, but it's making money. And like, it's a question you have to ask yourself. Do I give up the money I'm making and go to making much, much less to pay writers to do it, knowing that long term it's in my interest, right? That's something all entrepreneurs have to decide. It's a tough decision, right? Because, it's like I get the money right now. It's nice. But if you want to grow, it's something you have to do.
Yeah, and two, you just think that one decision opens up all kinds of different things. Now you have to figure out how do you make more money per page view. So you have to go into deals with advertising networks. And so, yeah, it definitely, it's a big decision in that, it changes your entire operating model. We start out paying writers a flat rate. Next thing you know, we've got these advertising networks in place, and then we're thinking, hey, what about a page view model? And then you're splitting between those two, and then next thing you know, you've gotten rid of the flat rate model, and your whole model, is kind of changing. And I'd say, that's something that's, no matter who buys this, it's the news industry. It changes pretty quickly online now. So, I always get asked, what day to day, kind of what's the setup and what takes your time. And, for me, that's the thing that takes my time. Advertising networks, writers, and kind of figuring out, how to stay ahead of the curve a bit.
You've done a lot of optimizing the site. You've done a lot of hiring writers. Tell me something that you did with the site that you tried but just didn't work. It didn't hit for whatever reason.
I'll say we tried to move. I think if you look at the numbers, we have a few months where we took a loss, and that was where we tried to expand. We were seeing a lot of success with entertainment news. We were able to drive huge amounts of traffic through that. And so we figured, why not just expand the flat rate writers and get guaranteed content? We're going to see a great return on that. And for whatever reason, that just we kind of fell flat on our face with that operation. So
do you think entertainment page views are just cheap and easy? Like they're a lot easier to get, but a lot harder to monetize? Is that the problem?
That's exactly what it was. So, you're thinking, oh man, this traffic is amazing. And it's just, nearly impossible to monetize that effectively.
I have people starting these like viral entertainment sites and they're just sharing their page views. They're talking about the traffic. And I'm like, oh my God, like we get, 40,000 visits a month, 30 to 40,000 visits a month. Like I worked so hard for those visitors and they're worth so much. And they just, put this blog together. 6 months later, they're getting 100,000 page views. Are you kidding me? But I think that's part of the issue, and the problem with it is trying to monetize that, right?
Sure. And, the other example right along those lines, I was asked this question yesterday. Somebody said, why don't you have a big social media presence? And I said, because at the end of the day, it doesn't make money. We've had huge viral hits on Facebook at certain points. And, at the end of the day, it doesn't produce, nearly kind of what the organic search stuff does. So, yeah, I try out all kinds of different stuff on this site, always trying to kind of find something new, something, not better, but a different source of revenue. And, a lot of that stuff has just fizzled out. It hasn't worked, but, it's led to some of the stuff that's set up in the site now. So
what did you do that was just a win? Like something that you were like, wow, I'm so glad I did this, and I'm definitely going to apply to any future sites that I build?
I would say some of the gallery stuff we've been doing has been working fairly well for us on this site. That I'm still trying to work out. Kind of one of those things. You see success or you see the seeds of success, and now it's a matter of kind of working it out and figuring out how that works exactly. But that's kind of been an interesting spot for us on this site, is kind of seeing, how people are interacting with that portion of the site.
That's not clear to me. What do you mean by gallery?
We had some galleries on there. We were just testing this out. We've run it, kind of bits and pieces throughout the year, but they're mainly like, see the 10 craziest. It's the same stuff you see all over the internet on Facebook and all that stuff.
Oh, the BuzzFeed stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
10 things that blah, blah, blah. You won't want to miss number 3 kind of thing. Okay.
Exactly. So, yeah, we've seen some success, but, again, it's that thing of like, how do you monetize it? So
I hate you guys, man. You hooked me in with that. Like, I can't help but click on it. It's horrible.
We all hate it.
And then you click through and you're like, why did they get me again?
It's the one downside of the media world today, but, I can tell you it works.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, let's talk about traffic and earnings a bit. So break down the organic versus referral versus direct versus social traffic. Is this all organic? Do you do any paid traffic?
We're experimenting with some paid traffic stuff right now. Literally within the last few weeks, I'm kind of, delved into that a little bit to see if there's anything there. But for this operation, more or less, it's organic search traffic through Google and Google News.
Talk to me a little bit about the monetization sources. I know you use AdSense, you use a bunch of different ad networks. Like, how did you find them? Which ones drive the majority of the revenue?
Yeah, so, everybody asks, hey, what's your AdSense revenue? And, obviously just hand over that information. They say, how does this, work? You're not even remotely close. And AdSense, I think for us, month to month tends to be the third best performing ad network. But more or less how we've kind of forged these partnerships is, I just have my assistant go through and look up any ad network we can find. We go through the process. The site's big enough. We very, very rarely get rejected for an ad network. And once we get accepted, then we just put their tags on. We test them out for a few days, kind of see how they perform. Jot those numbers down, and then we just, look at what we're running and see if they fit in. If they beat anyone out, they get priority. And then we just kind of keep doing that, month to month.
Your top ad network drives how much of the revenue?
Right now, I'd say they're fairly evenly split. I think AdSense might be our biggest one in the past few months. I'd have to double check that. But what we're seeing from our top performers is probably $3,000, maybe $4,000. And we have that split against, or I guess probably throughout at any one point, probably 4 different networks. And then the other, 8 now bring in, probably $1,000 a month, just off of those.
So we're basing your price on 14 months of history. So this site definitely has some history in terms of the earnings. But how stable are those earnings? I know you have had some down months and then it does change, but you are paying your writers a percentage, or you're paying them a piece on page views. So how stable would this be for a new buyer? Would it be, 25,000 gross one month and 6,000 gross the next?
Yeah, that's the thing. Working with these advertising networks, you really can see, big swings on that front. We've tried to, since around December, we've tried to, stabilize that significantly by bringing on, a lot of different advertising partners. And if you look through 2014, it's pretty clear we had one big advertising partner. And then their operating model, for whatever reason, kind of seemed to collapse towards the end of the year. And that was kind of a wake-up call for us to diversify and so we take a little bit off the plate in terms of not getting that huge windfall, from one big advertiser, but it's a much more stable operation as a result.
Yeah, you're trying to balance it out. At the same time, you lose some of the peaks. You dump some of the valleys, but you dump some of the peaks as well. How much content is on the site right now? Here's the big question. And how much needs to be added monthly?
I don't know what we have total in terms of overall articles. It's quite a bit. I think it's probably north of 10,000 articles. We do on average around 40 articles a day. So, like I said, half of that is probably produced by our full-time writer, and the other half, obviously there's a little bit of give and take on day-to-day stuff produced by the part-time writers.
Okay, great. So you've got, 10,000 plus articles. You've got about 40 articles added a day. And this is done by both your full-time writer, which is included in the expenses of a little over $8,000, and then the part-time writers that are paid on page views, they're adding articles as well. Let's talk a little bit. So that's a lot of content, right? But luckily
there's a lot of content.
A ton. Luckily for us and for the buyer that's coming on, you have the writers that are, of course, willing to go with it. And then you have your process for bringing them on and getting them trained. And you'll be sharing that with the new buyer and passing that over during training, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Great. Okay, let's talk about some opportunities for this site. Now, if you were buying the site, if you were looking at this and this was a good fit for your portfolio and you wanted the least risky path to growth, what would you focus on? If you just wanted kind of a slow and steady, let me add 15% to the business this year, what would you do?
For me, it would be just adding on writers. We should be adding on writers right now. I just don't have the time. And, for me, I want to put my focus towards other projects now. But, there should be, I'd say, doubling the writing staff within the next 2 or 3 months would be my priority.
Let me ask you this now. If you were, don't be fearful. Don't worry about messing up the model. And you just wanted to go for it. You wanted to double or triple this site's earning inside of 12 to 18 months. You can make any changes you want to, dump this, grow that. What would you do?
I would focus on, building out the social media, that side of the operation, figure out a way to monetize it.
That didn't work for you, but I know other people that it does work for.
Right. That's the thing. Like, there's a model out there. People are using it. I just haven't figured it out. It's not my background. It's not my focus right now. But, if somebody knows that, then you've got a massive, kind of operation here. You've got a good, solid search operation that's driving in lots of traffic. And then if you couple that with, a solid social media presence, you would have a pretty monster operation going.
Awesome. And you might suffer a little bit short. It's like building an email list, right? You might suffer a little bit short term because you're not getting the clicks, you're not getting paid for those. But in the long term, that can be a massive gain for you by building those followers and something you can go back to drive more traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. The great thing is we played with this a little bit and then it just, wasn't a priority. It wasn't, my focus at the end of the day. But, just from the search traffic you have coming in right now, if you put up, join our Facebook page, we're seeing some pretty good results just having that traffic hit the links organically. And then you build your Facebook presence or your Twitter presence, organically just through the traffic that's already there and established on the site right now.
So if you were looking to buy this site, this was something you were looking at, and you were looking at this critically, what would be your concerns? What would be the holes? What would be the, I hope this doesn't happen to the site kind of worries, or, what would keep you up at night?
For me, it's like, are the writers going to produce content on a consistent basis? Are we going to be able to, have them actually, more or less do what our expectation is and, do it for the price that we have in place right now? We ran this science news site for a while that we sold off earlier this year. And, what we were seeing towards the tail end was a lot harder than 2 or 3 years ago to find good science writers. And that was something that, I still have no idea why it's become more difficult to find, that type of content, but it is. And, that's one of those things that just kind of creeps in. And, if you can't find writers, that's a problem if your entire operation is based on people writing content.
Yeah, that's
the good thing with this site is it's, you have a diverse set of topics, so you're not going to run into that. But, I don't like the model of train a writer, 2 weeks later they move on, you never see them again. That's a lot of work for very little payout, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you, so do you ever have a situation where, you bring on a writer and they are just driving a ton of page views, and for whatever reason you just do not get paid on that traffic, where you're paying out the writer more than you're earning from that particular writer?
The only time I've seen that, and I figured out a fairly easy way to mitigate that risk, is big social media traffic. And Facebook probably at the very worst you break even on that traffic. But the big ones I've seen, or the big one, is Reddit. Reddit traffic can be massive. And this actually happened to us, I think, in February, and I took a little bit of a hit on this, but it's also when I figured out just, redirect that traffic and don't deal with it. That's the only instance I've seen where the model has broken down for the commission-based stuff. So.
Yeah, Reddit can blow you up. Like we get, on the first page of some of the moderately popular subreddits, and we just get a ton of traffic. I can't imagine you get on the first page of Reddit, that will shut you down. It will blow up your site.
That's the thing. I think at that point we were the third story on the front page, and we did something like 300,000 off of that. And that was just a mass. So, it's one of those things now. I think it may even be in the code on the site. It just says if it's a referrer from Reddit, just don't even deal with it. So that's kind of how we got around that issue.
That's funny. It's funny because you're like, you go on Reddit and you're like, yes. And then you're like, oh, yeah. I don't know. Maybe not.
And then you look at those ad rates and you go, well, that wasn't worth it.
Yeah, we get a bunch of Reddit traffic and I'm like, oh yeah, no subscribers or whatever. That makes sense, Reddit. So let's talk about the work required for this. So can you talk to me a little bit about, what your day looks like? What type of work do you do on the site? What do you do to find the ad networks, to find the writers, and how much of that is process or other people?
Yeah, so, on the ad network side, we've invested a lot of time over the last 4 weeks or so, building a lot of different partnerships with, smaller ad networks, but folks that, when this sells, it'll be included in that package. So, I would say that would not be my main kind of focus once I bought this site. I think whoever buys this is going to have more than enough kind of ad partners to go through and, test stuff out day to day and that whole thing. The big thing will be...
Will it come with a list of those ad networks? Well, obviously the ad networks you're using, of course, but I mean additional ad networks that they could try out. Is that something you can provide?
Yeah, I mean, I can provide that. I don't think there is anyone that we haven't been in contact with at this point. I mean, I would really be surprised. We've, dug through a lot of these lists and just reached out to every single, one we could find. And there were so many more out there than I thought. So yeah, I mean, we can kind of provide that template for that process as well. But what somebody's, walking into, I mean, they're going to go through those lists and there's probably not a single ad network on there that we haven't already reached out to and included in this. So day to day would be, really just looking at how does, one ad network, perform versus another one. Because, even though, on that CPM basis, if it's a difference between, $28 and $31 per 1,000 page views, I mean, yeah, it's only $3 per 1,000, but when you apply it to 500,000, that's $1,500 a month. So, $1 here, $1 there ends up, being a pretty big difference across the course of 4 weeks. And then obviously applied across the year, it's a pretty good chunk of change.
We talked to you about this and you're saying that just to maintain the site, I mean, you're dealing with emailing writers to answer questions, managing writers that are leaving or coming on board, and basically following your process for that. And if you're looking to sustain this, you're probably looking at about 3 hours per day, maybe 15 to 20 hours per week, but that, someone could come in obviously and put a lot more time into this and grow that. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, to maintain it, there's, just making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to and then, do a few tests during the day. I mean, yeah, it'd be a couple hours a day, but, like you said, if it's someone who wants to come in and really, move it forward. For me, I spend, a good 16, 17 hours a day just working on, all kinds of different projects. But, if I want to take a vacation for 2 weeks, you can do that and it wouldn't change a thing in terms of how it operates.
Not short term, but long term. Yeah, that's a great.
Yeah. So it's like anything. If you want to walk in and just have it keep operating as is, I mean, it would work just fine for that. But, to expand it, you obviously have to invest some time and some energy.
Are there any skills that you think are required to take this over as a buyer? And then I guess the second part of that question is, what skills do you think someone could have that would be a real advantage to growing the site?
First thing, I think somebody should have just some very rudimentary coding experience just so that they can put ads in, copy and paste code in. So I would say, or at least have somebody within your operation who knows how to move files around on servers, stuff like that. Obviously when we sell this, we'll move everything over and do that whole thing. But, if you run into, certain situations where you have to remove an ad or, something like that, just being able to do it fairly quickly would be, I think, useful. In terms of, what was the second question?
So if someone, wanted to grow this, like what kind of skill sets could you see being valuable? I mean, one of them I'd say that we've got kind of already identified would be social media skills. Like if you know how to work with viral sites, that would be advantageous. Paid traffic, maybe kind of some arbitrage, right?
For me, the big one would be social media. I mean, this site, without even trying, tends to bring in a pretty good amount of social media traffic. And, I just haven't found an effective way to monetize that. If somebody knew how to do that, it would be an immediate boost to it just from day one.
Are you doing any of the Taboola, Outbrain kind of, traffic swap deals?
We started to. We're looking into that a little bit. The model is still, at least for me in the early stages. I haven't figured out, how these other sites are doing it. I mean, it's like the social media thing. You look around, you see sites that are running solely based on that, and you start thinking, well, they're not losing money doing that, so there must be a model out there to replicate and run. But yeah, I'm starting to look into it. We just haven't figured it out yet.
I know a guy who does that, and he breaks even, right? He spends what he gets, the traffic he gets, whatever. It's all kind of break even. But his whole goal with that is to drive more page views, to make it more active, to get, more shares, to get better rankings on Google. Like it helps all the other things to do that. So he's cool breaking even on it just because of all the intangibles that it brings with it, which that was crazy to me. I'd never considered that before. And he brought that up. I was like, wow, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's there you go. I mean, that's something I had never thought of either. And, you know, at the end of the day, that makes perfect sense.
Right. If you can get better, like time on site, if you're just getting more traffic, if you get a few more tweets and a few more whatever, like that is going to drive some additional, right? That's not direct traffic from them. And if you're breaking even on that, that's fine. But the additional social can give you that edge.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Crazy. So, all right, man. So let's do some additional information or some questions that some buyers might have. One of the things they might wonder about is, are you willing to sign a non-compete? You know, they may worry that you're going to turn around and start up a domain with an S on the end or whatever, and then start competing with them directly. Is that something that you're willing to do?
Yeah, I mean, we'll sign like a limited non-compete where, you know, we're not going to endanger their traffic at all. You know, like I said, I'm trying to get out of this, you know, the news side of this and just focus on our political news site. So
you're building a similar site in the political space, but you'd avoid the other industries, for example.
Yeah, I mean, if we cover something in tech, we're not going to cover something just in tech. It's going to be something politically related, but we're also looking to cover stuff and actually do some reporting stuff. So that's not really going to be the focus of the political news site, you know, competing directly with big major national news stuff. So
let's talk about the turnover for this site. Now, if I was looking to buy this site, I'd have some concerns about making sure that, you know, the writers come over, that they're willing to do that. I'd want to make sure that your process for finding, hiring, training, and releasing, if needed, writers is documented. Do you have that? Is that something you can turn over? And how much support are you willing to offer a new buyer?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the writing stuff, that's, you know, we've sold news sites before, and I think, you know, probably a total of 20, maybe a few more writers. I've only had one writer during a transition, you know, say they couldn't continue, and that was for reasons that were completely outside of the transition. So we haven't had an issue in terms of once we sell a site, the writer's saying, oh, we're not going to go work for this new owner. You know, like I said, most of these guys have been on with us for a while. They like doing it. It pays them well. It's got good flexible hours. So, you know, they know what the operation is. They've obviously bought into it. It's worthwhile for them. So, you know, whether I'm running it or somebody else is running it is kind of irrelevant for them. In terms of Dan as a full-time writer moving over, I've spoken to him and he's, you know, fine with it. So, you know, whatever the contract is that somebody needs to negotiate with him, obviously we have a template for that that's worked out well. So I imagine it would end up being fairly close to whatever that is.
Awesome, Kramer. Okay, now, you know, clearly if a buyer comes in full price, wants to get it done, that's ideal. But sometimes buyers do want to hold back. For example, like sometimes we do deals where they do 70% up front, 30%, you know, after 30 days of training, or 80% up front, 20% after training. Would you be open to something like that?
I mean, it depends what the price point is. I mean, if it's high enough, sure. I mean, I have no problem taking, you know, some month in. That's not an issue for me. If it's a low price point, then, you know, I'm less inclined to kind of figure things out.
What about an earn out where they do, look, I'll give you 60 or 70% up front, but I want to do the additional amount over 6 months or 12 months. Is that something you'd be open to?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Cool. All right. And then let's do a quick wrap up here. The niche, as I said before, is a, you know, news blog. You're basically a publisher, got a bunch of different writers, and you're running the sports, the entertainment niche, the, you know, tech, the science niche. You've got a ton of writers. You're putting about 40 pieces of content up a day. It's got about 10,000 plus pieces of content on there now. Site was built in November 2012. It's monetized with AdSense, Lanista, AdBlade, and a bunch of other networks. Net profit on the site is $7,434.22. That's over a 14-month average, and it gets right around 500,000 page views per month. Kramer, what's your best pitch in 30 seconds or so on why someone should purchase the site?
Yeah, I think, you know, you're looking at a fairly established news site. This is a model that, you know, at least under my ownership has been refined and tweaked over, you know, a couple years now. So you're getting something where, you know, the owner has really invested, you know, his time into producing one of the better revenue models, I'd say, you know, for a small news site that's out there. In terms of, you know, our past, we've, you know, sold sites before. Each time we've done it, it's been a smooth transition and a smooth process. And I think every buyer who's worked with us has been happy with the product they've ended up with.
Awesome. Now, for anyone listening to this, if you're on the listing page at empireflippers.com and you want more information about this, including the domain and all the details, including earnings and traffic, go ahead and look on the top right-hand corner. You'll see a button where you can click and pay the deposit. Once the refundable deposit has been paid, we will share all those details with you so that you can do your due diligence and see if the site's right for you. If you're watching this elsewhere on YouTube or whatever, you can click the link that will take you to the listing page. You can get a bit more details, and again, you can pay the deposit if you want all of the information. Kramer, thank you so much for being on, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Justin.